The cowboy gave his last horse to a stranger and paid the price at dawn. A lonely cowboy gave away his last horse to a stranger, and by morning he would discover a betrayal that would haunt him forever. Families torn apart, a ruthless threat, and a choice that could cost his very soul. Stay until the final moment. Nothing is what it seems. The sun dipped low over the arid horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, as if it were bleeding into the vastness of the prairie. Dust hung in the air like a memory, swirling around the hooves of the last horse on the ranch. The old cowboy, Jeb Hollister, stood at the edge of his property, leaning against the splintered fence, his weather-beaten face a map of lines carved by years of sun and sorrow. He watched the horse, the only companion he had left after the last of his cattle had succumbed to drought and despair. This was a hard land, a place where kindness was as rare as rain. Jeb had never been one to shy away from trouble. In his youth, he had roamed with a wildness that matched the untamed spirit of the West. But the years had stripped away his bravado, leaving behind a quiet resolve. He believed in the life of a cowboy, in the code of honor that bound men to their word. Yet, as he looked at the sun setting behind the distant mountains, he felt the weight of loneliness pressing upon him like an iron yoke. He hadn't always been alone. Jeb had lost his wife, Mary, to a fever that swept through the valley like a thief in the night. Her laughter had once filled the air, brightening the dimmest of days. Now, silence reigned, punctuated only by the distant call of a coyote or the rustle of the wind through the tall grass. The ranch was a ghost of what it used to be, and Jeb often found himself wandering through the memories that clung to the walls of the old barn, where dust motes danced in the fading light. As he turned to head inside, a figure emerged from the edge of the prairie, silhouetted against the dying sun. Jeb squinted, his heart quickening. The stranger appeared weary, a shadow of a man cloaked in tattered clothing, dust-covered and gaunt. He was leading a horse, an impressive creature, its coat gleaming like polished copper, muscles rippling beneath its skin. Jeb's heart sank. He knew the look of desperation all too well. The stranger approached, his eyes sunken yet bright with the flicker of hope. "Mister, I've been ridden for days," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need help. My name's Illy." Jeb studied the man. He could see the pain etched across his face, the way his hands trembled as they gripped the reins. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Jeb replied, his voice gravelly but calm. "What's happened?" Illy took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his tale. "My family, we were settling near the river. A band of Apaches came through. They took everything, our horses, our supplies, my wife and son." His voice cracked, and Jeb felt the stirrings of compassion rise within him, a flicker of something long buried. "Why didn't you go for the law?" Jeb asked, though he knew the answer. "Out here, the law was as elusive as a summer rain. They wouldn't listen," Illy whispered, his eyes glistening. "I had to find them, to save them. I've been following their trail." Jeb looked at the horse, a noble creature, and then at Illy, the desperation radiating from him like a heat wave. He felt the pull of a choice, profound and heavy. He had only one horse left, the one he relied on for the small tasks that kept him afloat. But in that moment, he saw not just a man in need, but the reflection of his own lost dreams of family, of love, of a life not yet extinguished by the harshness of the world. "I'll give you my horse," Jeb said, surprising even himself. "But you need to promise me you'll bring her back once you've found your family." Illy stared at him, disbelief flickering across his face. "You do that for a stranger?" Jeb nodded, a quiet resolve settling deep within him. "In a world like this, we have to look out for one another. I can't let you go empty-handed." The exchange felt both monumental and fragile, like the last moment before a storm breaks. Jeb led the horse from the stable, his heart heavy yet buoyed by a sense of purpose. The sun dipped further, casting long shadows across the ground, as he handed the reins to Illy, who looked as if he'd been given a lifeline. "I'll find them," Illy promised, his voice a mix of gratitude and determination. "I swear it." As the two men stood there, a bond forged in the fires of desperation and kindness, Jeb felt the weight of his decision settle. He watched as Illy mounted the horse, the animal moving fluidly beneath him, as if it had been waiting for this moment. With one last look, Illy rode off into the gathering darkness, a solitary figure against the vast expanse of the prairie. Yet, as the first stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, Jeb couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a grave mistake. The world outside was unforgiving, and he had given away the last of what tethered him to hope. In the quiet of his empty ranch, Jeb stood alone, the silence echoing around him like a haunting refrain. Did he truly believe Ellie would return, or had he simply cast away his last chance of survival? He felt a stirring within, a blend of fear and faith battling for dominance. As the moon ascended, illuminating the landscape in silver light, Jeb turned back toward the house. He had made his choice, a choice rooted in compassion, yet he knew the cost might be greater than he could bear. The dawn would come, and with it, the reckoning of his decision. Little did he know, the price he would pay would be far more than the loss of a horse. It would be a test of his very soul. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden hue over the vast expanse of the prairie. Jeb Hollister stood at the edge of his ranch, the last rays of light dancing on the dust that swirled around his boots. He squinted into the distance, searching for any sign of Ellie, but the rolling hills and rugged terrain offered no comfort. With each passing moment, the sense of unease settled deeper in his gut, like the weight of a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. He had watched Ellie ride off with Ghost, his stallion, a creature as much a part of him as the worn leather of his saddle. The sound of hooves fading into the night had echoed in Jeb's ears, a haunting melody that tugged at his heartstrings. He had given away his last tether to life and purpose, and now he felt the emptiness gnawing at him. What if Ellie didn't return? What if the stranger had simply vanished into the darkness, taking with him the last vestiges of Jeb's hope? The prairie was a cruel mistress, and Jeb had learned that lesson the hard way. The wind howled through the tall grass, whispering secrets of lost dreams and broken promises. He turned away from the horizon, the weight of his solitude pressing heavily on his shoulders. The ranch had once been alive with laughter and the clatter of hooves, but now it lay silent, an echoing reminder of the life he had built with Mary. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, kicking a small stone that skittered across the ground. "You should have kept the horse, old man." As he trudged back to the weathered porch, the creaking wood beneath his feet felt like a reminder of the years slipping through his fingers. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling like memories in his mind. It burned as it passed down his throat, but it was a familiar sting, one that dulled the edges of his sorrow. Jeb sank into the old rocking chair, the wood groaning in protest. He gazed out at the stars beginning to twinkle in the night sky, bright points of light in a sea of darkness. Each star held a story, a memory of a time when he had believed in the goodness of the world. But that belief had faded like the sun, leaving shadows in its wake. He thought of Ellie, the desperation etched on the stranger's face, the way his hands trembled as he clutched the reins. Jeb had seen that look before, had worn it himself, when he had lost Mary to the fever that swept through the town like wildfire. The night she took her last breath, he had felt as though the ground had opened up beneath him, swallowing him whole. He had fought to keep his head above the water, but the waves of grief had dragged him under, leaving him gasping for air. "What made me think I could save that boy?" he whispered to the stars, seeking solace in their distant glow. A soft breeze rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and earth. Jeb closed his eyes, allowing the cool air to wash over him, and he thought of Mary's laughter, the way it twinkled like the stars above. As the night deepened, Jeb's thoughts turned inward. Had he acted out of compassion or foolishness? He had known the risks of lending his horse. A thought echoed in the back of his mind, like a relentless drumbeat. The prairie was unforgiving, its beauty laced with danger. But the look in Ellie's eyes had cut through his own sorrow, igniting a flicker of hope long since extinguished. Suddenly, a distant sound shattered the stillness, a low rumble, like thunder rolling across the plains. Jeb shot upright, his heart racing as he strained to listen. It was not the wind. It was the unmistakable sound of hooves pounding against the ground, a rhythm that quickened his pulse. He leaped from the chair, the whiskey forgotten, as he rushed to the edge of the porch. In the darkness, a figure emerged, silhouetted against the starlit sky. Jeb's heart soared and plummeted all at once, a tempest of emotions swirling within him. Was it Ellie? Had he returned? As the figure drew closer, Jeb's breath caught in his throat. It was Ellie, but the sight of him filled Jeb with dread. The stranger was slumped low in the saddle, Ghost's flanks heaving with exertion. Ellie's face was pale, the shadows under his eyes deep and bruised, and Jeb could see the telltale signs of loss swirling around him like a storm. Ali, Jeb shouted, rushing down the steps as the young man dismounted, swaying unsteadily on his feet. What happened? Ali staggered forward, his hands trembling as they reached for Jeb's shoulders. I couldn't find them, he gasped, his voice breaking, the weight of despair crashing over him like a wave. The Apaches, they took them. I tried, he choked on the words, the anguish spilling forth like an open wound. Jeb felt a knot tighten in his chest. I'm sorry, son. I'm real sorry, he pulled Ali close, feeling the heat radiate from the young man's body. Ali's breath was ragged, and Jeb could sense the depth of his pain, a mirror reflecting his own losses. They took everything, Ali whispered, his voice barely audible, as if saying it out loud would make it too real. I can't go back without them. I can't. Jeb's heart broke for the boy. He remembered the hollow ache of loss, the crushing weight of helplessness. You can stay here, Ali. We'll figure something out. He felt a flicker of resolve ignite within him, a stubborn flame against the darkness that threatened to engulf them both. Ali pulled back, searching Jeb's face, looking for a glimmer of hope. But what if they come back? What if they find me here? Then we'll face them together, Jeb replied, the words coming out steadier than he felt. He didn't know if he had the strength for another confrontation, but he couldn't let Ali stand alone, not when he had already lost so much. The moon climbed higher, casting a silvery glow over the land, illuminating the pain etched in Ali's features. He nodded slowly, the weight of uncertainty still heavy in his eyes. I don't want to be alone, he admitted, the vulnerability raw and real. You ain't alone, Jeb said firmly. As long as I'm breathing, you got a place here. Jeb felt a surge of determination in that moment, a flicker of purpose igniting his heart. He had given away his horse, but he could still offer something more, the strength of companionship, the promise of resilience. The prairie was vast and unforgiving, but together, perhaps they could carve out a small piece of hope. As they stood there, surrounded by the vastness of the night, Jeb felt the weight of his choices. He had sacrificed Ghost, the last link to his own past, but in return, he had gained a connection to someone who needed him. The prairie might be cruel, but it also offered the chance for redemption, for forging bonds where once there had been only loss. Ali took a shaky breath, a glimmer of gratitude shining through his despair. Thank you, Jeb. I don't know what I'd do without you. Jeb placed a hand on the young man's shoulder, squeezing gently, grounding them both in the moment. We'll find a way, Ali. We'll find a way. And as the stars twinkled above them, Jeb felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead would be filled with challenges and uncertainty, but for the first time in a long while, the weight of his loneliness began to lift, replaced by the flickering flame of hope, ignited by a stranger's need. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the prairie, the golden hues bleeding into shades of crimson and indigo. Jeb Hollister stood on the porch of his weathered ranch house, the wood creaking beneath his well-worn boots, as he watched Ali disappear into the vastness of the plains. A heavy weight settled in his chest, a mix of hope and dread swirling like a storm on the distant horizon. God help that boy, Jeb muttered under his breath, his voice barely rising above the whispering wind. He turned to face the emptiness of his land, the once thriving ranch now reduced to a desolate expanse, much like his own heart. The fields lay parched, the earth cracked and dry, mirroring the hollowness inside him. He could almost hear Mary's laughter echoing in the wind, a ghostly reminder of what had been lost. As twilight encroached, Jeb found himself lost in memories. Mary had loved sunsets like this. They would sit together, wrapped in a quilt, watching the day surrender to the night. Ain't it beautiful, Jeb, she would say, her voice a melodic lilt that could soften the hardest of days. The prairie feels alive, like it's breathing just for us, but now, all he had was silence and the rustle of the wind, a cruel mockery of those vibrant moments. Jeb turned back to the ranch house, his heart heavy with the promise he had made to Ali. The boy had reminded him of a younger version of himself, full of fire and desperation. He had seen that same look in the eyes of cattle rustlers, men driven to madness by loss, clinging to hope like a lifeline, as they faced a world that had turned its back on them. He leaned against the porch railing, the rough wood biting into his palms. How could he have been so foolish? He had given Ali his last horse, a creature as loyal as they came, thinking it would lead the boy to salvation. But what if it led him to danger instead? What if he never returned? The thought gnawed at him, a relentless ache that deepened with every tick of the clock. Night fell, wrapping the prairie in a blanket of stars that twinkled like distant memories. The silence was profound, punctuated only by the distant howl of a coyote. Jeb stepped inside, the cool air of the house contrasting sharply with the heat of the day. He moved through the dim light, each creak of the floorboards echoing his solitude. The kitchen table lay bare, a stark reminder of the meals once shared. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid glinting in the low light, and took a long, steadying sip. "Lord knows I need this," he said to the empty room, the words hanging in the air like a prayer. He sank into a chair, the weight of the day pressing down on him. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls, as if the house itself were alive with the spirits of the past. Jeb closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the whiskey spread through him like a balm. He thought of Ellie out there, alone in the dark, facing whatever horrors the world had in store for him. The thought twisted something deep within Jeb, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to entertain since Mary's passing fear. Fear that he had failed to protect someone who needed it, that he had become nothing more than a relic of a world that had moved on without him. Hours slipped away, and the fire dwindled to embers. Jeb's thoughts drifted in and out of focus, until a sound broke through the quiet, a thud, followed by the rhythmic pounding of hooves approaching. Jeb shot up, heart racing, and rushed to the door, flinging it open just as Ellie rode into view. The boy was a sight to behold, pale and wild-eyed, hair tousled like a tumbleweed caught in the wind. Ghost, Jeb's faithful horse, was lathered in sweat, its sides heaving as Ellie dismounted, stumbling slightly as he landed. Jeb's heart sank at the sight of Ellie's face, etched with exhaustion and despair. "Ellie, what happened?" Jeb's voice cracked with concern, cutting through the stillness like a knife. Ellie took a moment to catch his breath, gripping the reins of Ghost tightly. I didn't find them," he gasped, each word heavy with defeat. "The Apaches were faster. They took them deeper into the canyon. I tried, Jeb, I really did." Jeb felt a wave of sympathy wash over him, mingling with the bitterness of his own regrets. "You did what you could, son. That's all anyone can do." But deep down, he felt the sting of failure. He had trusted Ellie with the last piece of his heart, and now it felt like a gamble that had gone terribly wrong. Ellie's shoulders slumped, the weight of the world resting squarely on his young frame. I thought I could save them. I thought." Maybe his voice trailed off, lost in the shadow of his own hopes. "Come inside, get some warmth," Jeb urged, stepping aside to let Ellie enter. The boy shuffled, his presence filling the empty space with a flicker of light. Jeb gestured toward the fire, where a few embers still glowed faintly. "I'll get you something to eat. You need to regain your strength." As Jeb moved to the kitchen, he felt the tension in the air, thick and palpable. He rummaged through the sparse pantry, pulling out what little food remained. A few stale biscuits and some dried jerky would have to suffice. He turned to Ellie, who stood by the fire, his eyes fixed on the flames, as if they held the answers he sought. "Ellie," Jeb began, hesitating as he approached the boy. "What do we do now? We can't just sit idle." Ellie's gaze flickered up, determination igniting briefly in his eyes. "We can't let them get away with it. I have to find my family. I won't stop until I do." Jeb nodded, a newfound respect blooming in his chest for the boy's tenacity. "All right then. We'll figure out a plan. But we need to be careful. Those Apaches won't take kindly to us snooping around, especially after what happened." Ellie's jaw set, a fire igniting behind his youthful eyes. "I'm not afraid, Jeb. I can't be. Not when they have my family." Jeb marveled at the boy's resolve, feeling a flicker of hope himself. Perhaps together they could face the darkness looming on the horizon. "Then we'll ride at dawn," he said firmly. "We'll gather what we can, and we'll track them down." As Ellie nodded, a silent understanding passed between them, a bond forged in the crucible of loss and desperation. They were both searching for something, Ellie for his family, and Jeb for a reason to fight against the encroaching despair that threatened to swallow him whole. They settled into an uneasy silence, the fire crackling softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls, echoing the tumult of their thoughts. Jeb's heart raced with the weight of the decision ahead, the thrill of the hunt mingling with the fear of failure. The prairie stretched wide and empty outside, a vast frontier that held both promise and peril. "Tomorrow," Jeb whispered into the dim light, his voice steadier than he felt. "Tomorrow will be a new beginning." And as the stars twinkled overhead, the two of them sat, united against the darkness, ready to face whatever challenges the dawn would bring. Chapter 4. Chapter 4. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, a fragile wash of gold and pink spilling into the vast expanse of the prairie. Jeb Hollister stood at the edge of his ranch, the chill of the night still lingering in the air, as he watched Lee slump down beside Ghost. The horse, a silver ghost himself, snorted softly, his breath misting in the cool morning air. Jeb's heart tightened at the sight. It was as if Ghost sensed the weight of their predicament, the unspoken promises hanging heavy around them. Lee's shoulders sagged, the weariness etched into his face, deeper than the lines of age. He looked up at Jeb, his eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I failed, Jeb. I couldn't find them. I couldn't even catch a glimpse of those bastards." His voice was raw, a mix of frustration and despair that resonated in the silence of the prairie. Jeb felt a pang of empathy for the young man. There was a fire in Lee's spirit that reminded him of himself, long ago, when the world seemed ripe with possibilities. "You didn't fail, Lee," he said, his voice steady despite the tremors of doubt that coiled in his gut. "You did what you could. Sometimes, that's all you can do." Lee's brow furrowed, but he nodded slowly, as if trying to convince himself of the truth in Jeb's words. I thought they might be close. I thought maybe." His voice trailed off, eyes drifting to the horizon, where the sun was poised to break free from the night's grasp. Jeb looked out over the endless prairie, where the dry grass whispered secrets to the wind. "You thought wrong, son. But that don't mean hope is lost." He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of earth and dew, grounding himself in the moment. "We've got to come up with a plan. If they took your family, we can find em. We just need to be smart about it." Lee's gaze sharpened, a flicker of determination igniting in his eyes. "What do we do?" Jeb stepped closer, his voice low and resolute. "We ride. There's a settlement to the north, where I reckon the Apaches might be trading. We can ask around, see if anyone's heard anything about your folks. We got to act fast, 'fore they move on." For a moment, Lee's fear seemed to dissipate, replaced by the thrill of action. "You think they'd sell them?" he asked, hope threading through his tone. "Could be," Jeb replied, his thoughts racing. "But we gotta be careful. These ain't just people we're dealing with. They'll fight for what's theirs, and they are known for their cunning." The young man swallowed hard, a mix of excitement and dread. "I'm ready." Jeb looked at him, gauging the sincerity behind the bravado. "We'll ride together, then. But you need to know, Lee, this ain't no game. Lives are at stake." Lee nodded, the weight of those words settling over him like a heavy cloak, as they prepared to saddle Ghost and Jeb's own horse. Dusty, Jeb felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in a long while. Purpose. The dawn's light, symbolic of new beginnings, cast long shadows behind them, merging with the past they both carried. As they mounted their horses, Jeb glanced back at the ranch. The once proud homestead now stood like a weary sentinel, its walls weary and cracked under the relentless sun. He could almost hear Mary's laughter echoing through the halls, and he felt a pang of sorrow. But he shoved that feeling deep down, burying it under layers of resolve. He had a chance to do something good, to forge a connection that might lead to redemption, not just for Illy, but for himself as well. The prairie stretched out before them, a sea of golden grass, rippling under the gentle caress of the morning breeze. With a nudge of his heels, Jeb urged Dusty forward, followed closely by Illy on Ghost. The rhythmic sound of hooves against the earth became a comforting heartbeat, matching the pulse of hope that was rising within Jeb. As they rode, the landscape changed subtly. The flatness of the prairie began to give way to rolling hills, and the air thickened with the scent of wild sage and dust. Jeb led the way, keeping his gaze sharp and alert, while Illy, riding close behind, fought against the swell of his emotion. He was a man on a mission, but the reality of his family's fate loomed large, casting a shadow over his determination. They traveled for hours, the sun climbing higher in the sky, relentless and unforgiving. Jeb stole sidelong glances at Illy, who seemed lost in thought, his jaw set in grim determination. "You got any idea what you'll do if we find them?" Jeb finally asked, breaking the silence. Illy turned his head, surprise flickering across his face. "I'll get them back, of course. I'll do whatever it takes." His voice held a fierce edge, but Jeb could see the uncertainty lurking beneath the surface. "Sometimes, whatever it takes can lead to choices you can't take back," Jeb cautioned, his own heart heavy with the weight of his past decisions. "You need to think things through. Emotions can cloud your judgment." I'm not afraid, Ellie shot back, but Jeb noticed the quiver in his voice, a crack in the bravado. Fear ain't the enemy, son. It's what you do with that fear that counts. Jeb's voice softened as he remembered the knots in his own stomach when he had faced down the bandits who had taken everything from him. Just keep your wits about you. Ellie nodded, but the tension in his posture remained. They continued on, the prairie unfolding endlessly before them, a vast, open canvas painted with the hues of fleeting hope and lingering despair. Just as the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground, they arrived at the settlement. It was a small cluster of buildings, weather-beaten and weary, surrounded by a wooden fence that had seen better days. A few townsfolk moved about, their faces lined with the hard-earned wisdom of survival. Jeb steered Dusty toward the hitching post, glancing around, assessing the place. We stick together, Ali. Ask questions, but don't draw attention to ourselves. A lot of folks around here don't take kindly to strangers. Ali swallowed, the weight of Jeb's warning settling heavily on his shoulders. Right, he dismounted, his eyes scanning the area, searching for any sign of the Apaches or whispers of his family. As they made their way through the settlement, Jeb couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that clung to the air. The townsfolk eyed them with curiosity and caution, their expressions revealing little. Jeb approached a grizzled man leaning against a wooden post, his face weathered by years of sun and hardship. "Excuse me, Sir," Jeb began, his voice steady as the man turned to face him. "We're looking for information about some folks who might have been taken by a band of Apaches. A woman and a child." The man's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face. "You ain't the first to come asking about that. The Apaches have been causing trouble lately. You best be careful, stranger." Jeb nodded, sensing the man's reluctance to divulge too much. "We're just trying to help. Do you know where they might have gone?" "Word is they've been seen near the river," the man replied reluctantly, casting a glance at Ali. "But it's a dangerous place. Boy, you'd best not go poking around where you don't belong." Ali's frustration boiled over. "They're my family. I can't just sit back and do nothing while they're out there." His voice was louder than intended, drawing the attention of those around them. The grizzled man straightened, his eyes hardening. "Watch your mouth, boy. This ain't a game. You want to find him. Be ready to face the consequences. Not all battles are won with bravado." Jeb placed a steadying hand on Ali's shoulder, feeling the tension radiate from him. "We appreciate the warning," he said softly, his gaze steady. "But we have to try. We owe it to them." The man's expression softened slightly, but he merely nodded, stepping back into the shadows. "You do what you will, but don't say I didn't warn you." As they walked away, Jeb turned to Ali, who was still fuming. "You got to learn to rein in that temper. Ain't gonna help us find your family." "I know," Ali muttered, anger simmering just beneath the surface. "But you don't understand. They are my blood. I can't just let them go." Jeb felt a pang of compassion for the boy, recognizing the desperation that fueled his fire. "I understand more than you think, Ali. I lost everything once too. But we'll find them. We just have to keep our heads." As the sun dipped lower, the shadows grew long and dark, wrapping around them like a shroud. The air was thick with tension and unresolved emotions. But in that moment, Jeb felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. They would face whatever came next together, their fates intertwined in a dance of desperation and yearning. The prairie stretched before them, vast and unyielding, but for the first time in years, Jeb felt a glimmer of purpose, an echo of what it meant to protect, to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. And as they set their sights on the river where the rumors swirled, he knew they were bound for a confrontation that could change everything. With the last rays of sunlight casting a warm glow on their backs, Jeb and Ali rode on, the weight of their choices heavy in the air, yet buoyed by the fragile thread of hope that connected them both.